I'd like to talk today about what's often considered a very complicated topic, but I assure you it's very straightforward. This video is my sort of perspective on teaching modes and how to think about modes. If it doesn't really make sense after you've watched this, then search elsewhere. There are a couple of different ways to teach this topic, and this one resonates with me, and I've found this successful with my students. So, what are modes? You've probably heard of them before. You might have heard of them in the context of improvising. So what scales are good to use over these chords, and you'll hear the word, see the word mode a lot. A mode is basically a subset of an existing scale. So let's take what I consider the most important scale in Western music, which is the major scale. I'm going to talk about C major scale today, just to keep it nice and easy, just the white keys. And I'm going to play you a C major chord, and I'm going to play the C major scale over the top, and then we're going to have a quick chat about that. So here's C major chord and the scale. So all we did there was play the notes of C major scale over a C major chord. The notes are C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Okay? Now, the only reason we think of that as being C major rather than any other scale is that the note C sounds like our home note in that particular context. Now, if we play that scale without any chord underneath it and start and finish on C, we'll get the same effect because we're starting and ending on the same note, which feels like our resolution. But what if we were to start and end on a different note in the scale? What if we didn't start and end on C? So instead of playing, we played this. It's the exact same scale, same notes, white keys on the piano, but this time instead of starting and ending on C, I'm starting and ending on D. Now let me put that in some context for you with a chord. I'm going to play a D minor chord and do what I just did, the notes of C major, but instead of starting and ending on C, I'm going to start and end on D. So here's a D minor chord, and the C major scale starting and ending on D. Now, instead of sounding wrong or incorrect, it actually sounds really cool, and it's a really nice effect. And we're still playing the C major scale or the notes of C major, but they don't sound like C major anymore. And nor does that C note sound like home. If I play that chord again, here's our C note. That doesn't quite sound like home. This note sounds like we're finished when we land on that note. So this very easily illustrates the idea of modes. We basically just rearrange, well, not even rearrange, we basically re-look at our scale or our collection of notes. And instead of making C our home note or our tonal center, we make another one of the notes our tonal center. Now we have 7 notes in the major scale. In this case, the C major scale, we have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Well, C is the same note again, so 7 distinct different notes, and each one of those can be their own tonal center for their own scale, or, in this case, the word we use is mode. So the very first version of this, which is C major, actually has a different name. We could call it C Ionian mode, which is the very first mode of the major scale. Now, we never really call it that because we just sort of think of it as the major scale, but that in itself is a mode. So we would say C Ionian mode. We're going to play through each of the scales now. I'm going to show you what they sound like, or let you listen to what they sound like, and show you one way that you might be able to play these. Now, instead of showing you a million different shapes for each one, that's one method of learning the modes. I'm going to show you the method that I used when I started out, which is a really good way to get you in that ballpark, and that's to think about the major scale over a different root note. I'll explain what I mean as I go. So here's the major chord one more time, C major chord with a C major scale on top, which is going to give us our C Ionian mode. So let's have a listen to that. So a little bit of messing around there, but all based around C major. You can hear that sounds like a home note. You're super familiar with that sound, but it's important to touch on it anyway. The C Ionian mode, or major scale, sounds great over most major chords, depending on where the context is. So you can use the C Ionian mode over A major chord. The next chord we've got is the Dorian mode, and that's the second note in the major scale. If we start and end on that note, or make that our tonal center, we get the Dorian mode. So here's D minor chord, and over the top we're going to play the C major scale. But this time, I'm not necessarily going to start and finish on D, but I'm naturally going to lean towards that note because it's going to feel like home. So here's our new tonal center, our D, and I'm going to play C major over the top of that. It sounds beautiful. So whenever you've got a minor chord, any minor chord, if you'd like to get a Dorian sound or play the Dorian mode, you need to play the major scale one tone below your root note. And on the guitar, one tone is 2 frets. So let's say, for example, we've got E flat minor. If we want to play a Dorian sound over the top, we go a tone lower, which will give us D flat major or C sharp major, depending on how you want to think of it, and you play C sharp or D flat major scale. So that's one way to get this Dorian sound. Pick any minor chord and play the major scale starting from a tone below the root of that minor chord. So the next note in the scale, we've done C, we've done D, so we've got Ionian, we've got Dorian. The next note in the scale would be E. In this case, we could do this in any key, but it's just nice to think in the straight non-accidentals. The next note would be E. And we're going to play another minor chord. We're going to play E minor, and over the top of this I'm going to play C major, and we're going to get a new sound. So this is our new tonal center. So a very different sound, different from our Dorian sound, which is kind of spacey and ethereal, and different from the major sound, which is really happy and upbeat. This has got a almost Middle Eastern vibe to it, and almost sort of a Spanish vibe to it. It's got that, what we think of as the flat second in the chord. So we're going to come back to these modes at the end of the video, towards the end of the video, to talk about what's actually going on with these modes in terms of the intervals. But for now, let's just get in the ballpark by using this major scale trick. So in this case, play any minor chord if you want to get this sound. This, by the way, is the Phrygian mode. Phrygian, PH, not with an F. The Phrygian mode. So to get the Phrygian mode sound, you need to pick any minor chord, and then you play the major scale starting a major third below or a minor third above. So the easiest way to think of this is 1, 2, 3, 4 frets down to get to that major scale. So let me find a random minor chord. I'll do G minor, and over the top of that I'm going to play 1, 2, 3, 4 frets lower, a major scale starting on that note. So I'm going to play E flat major over a G minor chord. Here's a G minor chord, and here's our E flat major. And you can hear that our G note is the note we gravitate towards because that's our new tonal center. So that's the Phrygian mode. So we've got the Ionian mode, which we can also think of as the major scale, the Dorian mode, and the Phrygian mode. So the next mode we're going to talk about is the Lydian mode. And for this one I'm going to play an F major chord, which is the next note in our scale. So we've done Ionian, Dorian, Phrygian, and now Lydian is going to be this note. So that's an F major, and over the top I'm going to play a C major scale. Now of all the modes, this one's my personal favourite. So this is the F Lydian mode, and this sounds great over a major chord. It gives you a kind of spacey, an odd sound, and we're going to talk again later about why this works in terms of intervals, but just to get you in that ballpark so you can experiment with the sound, because I think that's the important thing first, is to get used to the sounds of these modes before you work out academically or using music theory why they sound the way they sound. It's important to learn how they sound so you can identify them in songs and then you can use them in your own playing and know what they're going to sound like. So to get this Lydian sound, we play any major chord with a root note on the A string, and then whatever fret we're on, we start the major scale on the E string at that same fret. So let me talk you through this. If I play, so if we want to play C Lydian, I'm going to play the major chord on the 3rd fret of the A string, that's a C major, and then, so because we played on the 3rd fret, we play a major scale starting on the 3rd fret, but now on the E string, so. Gives us our Lydian sound. I'm going to talk about why it sounds Lydian later on in the video, but like I said, let's get the sound in our head first. It's kind of a spacey version of the major scale. It's one note different, but it gives us a really interesting sound. Next mode is going to be the Mixolydian mode, Mixolydian mode. I might put the names on screen because it can get a little bit confusing. And this is very similar to the major scale, just like the Lydian was, but a different note has been changed this time. So going back to our major scale, we've got our Ionian, we played C Ionian, D Dorian, E Phrygian, F Lydian, now we're playing G Mixolydian. So let me play a G major and play our major scale over the top. So to play this, we need to do any major chord. Let me just pick this one at random. So I'll do B flat major, and then you need to go up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets and play that major scale. You probably noticed that wrong note in there. A bit of a clunker there, but for the most part, we're on the money. There we go. So that's the Mixolydian mode. The next mode would be, in our case, starting on A, and that's going to give us, this is an interesting one, this is where we get into the crux of this method of learning, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more later, but if I play A minor and then C major over the top, we get the A Aeolian mode, which is the A minor scale, the natural minor scale. So when I talked at the start about the major scale being the important parent scale, you might have thought to yourself, well, what about the minor scale? The minor scale is contained within the major scale. It's one of the modes of the major scale. So it's just, from my perspective, a subsidiary of that scale. So whenever you want to play the minor scale over any chord, so let's say we pick a random chord, F minor, you just need to go up 1, 2, 3 frets, which would in this case take us to A flat, and then you just play the major scale from that point. That will give you that minor sound, that natural minor sound. Now, because the natural minor scale is so common in fact that it's probably used as much as the major scale, even though they're technically the same thing, just from a different tonal center, different perspective. When we talk about these modes one more time, I'm going to be referring to whether they're a minor scale, a variant on the minor scale, or a variant on the major scale, because all of the modes, all of them, are, except one actually, which is a bit of an ugly duckling we're going to talk about now, are one note off from either the major or the minor. Just one note different, and that gives us this whole world of sound. So let's talk about this ugly duckling, the very last note. So we've just played C Ionian, D Dorian, E Phrygian, F Lydian, G Mixolydian, A Aeolian, which is also the minor scale, and now we've got B Locrian or Locrian. I'm going to say Locrian. This is a potentially horrible scale, but also can be quite beautiful. And the chord we need to play to make this work is the B half diminished chord, or the minor 7 flat 5 chord, which I'm going to play here. And if you don't know this chord, it's 2nd fret A string, 3rd fret D string, 2nd fret G string, 3rd fret B string. So here is the B half diminished chord, and I'm going to play C major over that. This is a very dark sounding scale. It can be used in loads of different situations. You can hear it in jazz to create tension, you can hear it in heavy metal to create dissonance. But the important thing is that you don't shrug this scale off as just being an ugly duckling. I know that was a bit of a mean thing to say about it, but it does have its uses. And especially with this chord, the half diminished chord or the minor 7 flat 5 chord, it's a very powerful chord and powerful arpeggio and can be used in a lot of different situations. So don't completely write it off, but I will have to say it's probably going to be the least used of these. So to get that sound, you get any minor 7 flat 5 chord, any half diminished chord. You can play this over a minor chord as well. It doesn't quite sound 100% right. And all you do is just play the major scale starting a semitone higher or 1 fret higher. So let's do that with just a minor chord now so you can see how that sounds. I'm going to play the D minor chord, I'll play it here, and then I'm going to play 1 fret higher, which would be D sharp, or really we should think of it as E flat major over the top. So D minor with E flat major over the top. Here it is over a half diminished chord, a minor 7 flat 5 chord. So they're the 7 modes of the major scale. At this point, if you just want to get the sound in your ears and to mess around with those different variations of the major scale, these different subsets, these different sound worlds, you can just use the information in this video, and I'm just going to recap that now, to mess around with that and play with that. If you've got someone else to play the chords, or you've got a loop pedal, I'm using an Electro-Harmonix Freeze to create that pad, you can get these sounds under your ears. The rest of the video, this last little bit, I'm going to talk about the theory behind it, which some people might think I should have spoken about before, but I think it's important that we familiarise ourselves with the scale first before we understand why they sound the way they sound. So let me just recap that. If you want to get the Ionian sound, which is the major sound, you play the major scale over any major chord. So if you've got A major chord, you play the A major scale. That one's straightforward. To get the Dorian sound, you play the major scale. Well, let's start from our target. So you pick any minor chord or any minor tonality. So let's say G minor, and then you play the major scale starting a whole tone lower than that. So if we play G minor, we play F major over the top, and that will give us a G Dorian sound. The next one's Phrygian, and for that we play any minor chord and then play the major scale starting from 4 frets below. So I'll just do F minor, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 will be D flat major. If we play that on top, we're going to get our Phrygian sound, which is that sort of Spanish Arabic sound. It's got that flat 2 in there, we'll talk about that in a second. Then we've got the Lydian sound, which is my favourite, and to play that one we need to do, basically if you play any chord on the A string, whatever fret your root note is on, hop it back a string and start a major scale from there. So let me show you. I'll do E flat major, which is 6th fret on the A string. So 6th fret on the A string, we go to 6th fret on the E string, which would be B flat, and we do a major scale from there. For the Mixolydian sound, which is the one afterwards, we're going to start with any major chord. So I'll play D major, and then it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frets higher than that will be the root note of the major scale you would need to play. To get that Mixolydian sound. Then we've got our, after our Mixolydian, we've got our Aeolian, which is our natural minor. So if you already know any shapes of the natural minor or the minor scale, as you've probably learnt it, then you're actually playing the Aeolian mode at the same time. But to get that, you play any minor chord and then start the major scale from 1, 2, 3 frets higher. So if I play F sharp minor, I go 1, 2, 3 frets higher, and we do the major scale starting from here. That gives us our F sharp Aeolian mode, or minor scale, depending on how you want to think of it. And the last one, Ugly Duckling is the Locrian mode, and for this you pick any minor 7 flat 5 chord or half diminished chord and just do the major scale 1 fret higher. So let me play, I'll do E flat, let's say D sharp, same note, but bear with me, D sharp half diminished, and I'll play E major over the top. All our sounds. Now, let's talk about the theory behind these. When I talk about the theory and how these are constructed, this also ties in with how you might want to learn the shapes. I'm assuming that most players have got a reasonably good understanding of the major scale. You'll maybe know 1 or 2 shapes of that. I'm also expecting you to know 1, maybe 2 shapes of the minor scale as well, the natural minor scale, which is one of our modes. Now I'm going to talk about all 7 of those modes real quick and how they relate to either the major or the minor scale, because we can lump them as being major type scales or modes. Scale mode, we can use this interchangeably really. In this case it doesn't really matter what we call it, is what we do with it. So major sounds and minor sounds. The major types are the Ionian, which is the very first one, our major scale, which gives us our nice major sound. The Lydian, which is the my favourite one, which gives us our sort of spacey sound. And the Lydian, if you compare, let's say for example, C Ionian or C major with C Lydian, they're exactly the same, but the Lydian mode has got a raised 4th note. So if we play C major, I'll just do a root note at this point. I play C major, so now C Lydian. Now the silly facial expressions give it away a bit, but that 4th note, the 4th, no longer lives here, it lives here. So we've got a raised 4th. So that's literally it. 1 note different has made that whole scale sound completely different and given it a completely new lease on life. So if you want, instead of thinking about my initial thing, which is thinking about in terms of a parent major scale over a minor scale, which requires a lot of moving up and down, you can think of the Lydian mode as being any major scale with a sharpened 4th, a raised 4th. So if you think intervallically when you're playing, all your 4ths, not frets but intervals, get raised, and that gives you the Lydian sound. Let's talk about the other major type mode, which is the Mixolydian, and I'll play that one more time, and I'm going to do a G major chord, and I'm going to play C major over the top. Now this is quite a bluesy sound. You'll hear it a lot in blues and jazz, and it sounds really summery to me, and these adjectives might not mean anything to you. The important thing is that you assign a emotion or sound or flavour to these. So when you're playing and you think, I want quite a spacey sound, or I want a summery sound, or whatever, you know what to associate with, musically to associate with that adjective to bring it out. This sounds a bit silly, but trust me, it is useful. Now I'm going to play like I did before, the root note. So here's our root note, C. Let me play C major followed by C Mixolydian, because again, 1 note different from the major scale. Here's C major. Here is C Mixolydian. One more time, C major, and then C Mixolydian immediately after, just straight with no messing around. C major, C Mixolydian. In this case, all we've done is flatten the 7th. So the 7th note in the scale, which would normally be a B, in this case is now a B flat, and that's all it is. So let me play the 3 major type modes over a C drone. Here's C major or C Ionian, C Lydian, and C Mixolydian. All very, very similar, but very, very different when used in context, and could create a whole different palette of sound. Now let's talk about the minor type modes, and some of these are more usable than others depending on the situation. I'm going to play I'm not going to recap how to get these sounds again, because I talked about that a lot at the start. I'm just going to run through like I just did, just for the sake of brevity. I can see this video is getting long. I'm going to play a C drone. I'm going to play C minor followed by C Dorian, so you can hear the difference. And this was the second mode we talked about. So first one was Ionian, second one was Dorian. Here's the C drone. Here's C minor. C Dorian. And in this case, what's happened is the sixth note in the minor scale, so we're talking about the minor scale as our reference now. The Dorian mode is just the minor scale, but the sixth note, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, has been raised a semitone. Okay, so it's got what we call the natural sixth in. So this is the minor. This is the Dorian. It's maybe not as harsh, it's maybe not as dissonant, it's a little bit, it's got more of an airy quality to it. Again, these adjectives might not mean anything to you, but you associate the sound you need to associate with them. And then the other minor mode that we're going to talk about now is the Phrygian mode. So here's the normal minor followed by the Phrygian. Minor, Phrygian. So in that case, the second note has been flattened to get that Phrygian sound, and that gives us a more dissonant sound. So if the minor is our starting point, we can think of the Dorian as being slightly less dissonant and the Phrygian as being even more dissonant. So if you wanted a more dissonant sound, and that flattened second gives you a really nice sort of Middle Eastern quality, or even a Spanish quality if you're thinking in terms of like flamenco guitar. Flamenco guitarist, obviously. So that's another tonality you can play with. The last mode I'm just going to touch on again, the Locrian mode, is basically, it's hard to explain because it's a combination of messing up the major and the minor. It's not just one note different. So if I play the C root, I'm going to play C major. Now I'm going to play C Locrian. Nearly every single note has been changed. I think the fourth is the only one that doesn't change in relation to the major. And if we think about it in relation to the minor, this is the minor, and this is the Locrian. So you can think of it as a minor scale, the Locrian mode. You can think of a minor scale with a flattened fifth and a flattened second, which is even more dissonant than the Phrygian. And again, really the only home for this most of the time, if you're sort of sticking within the quote-unquote rules, is to play this over a minor 7 flat 5 chord, a half diminished chord. So hopefully this has demystified this topic a little bit for some of you. People do disagree with the way I teach this. There are a few different schools of thought there. So if this hasn't made a lot of sense to you, don't worry. Seek out other methods of learning. It might be that my particular way of talking about the modes isn't for you. I like to try and get students in a position where they can recognize the sound of the modes and experiment with those sounds without having to learn millions of new shapes. Just by using the major scale shapes that they already know, they can create music and live in these sound worlds without having to sort of sit with a bunch of scale diagrams in front of them. The second part of this video, where I talked about the intervals, or the bit towards the end, is the key bit if you're trying to understand the theory behind this, and that way you can apply these modifications, raising the 6 from a normal minor scale to create a Dorian mode, or flattening the second in a minor scale to create a Phrygian sound. These are the things you need to know to apply them to your shapes if you want to think about this a bit more theoretically and without having to do that translation of, okay, how many frets down do we need to move? I think this initial way is a good way to get the sounds going. But hopefully it's demystified the topic in general. A lot of my students sort of just say, oh, modes, it's just too complicated. But it's a really straightforward thing. Essentially, all we need to do is think about any note of the scale as being its own little sound world, its own little tonal center, and we can create great new sounds from there. I might do some more videos on this particular topic in the future, but I don't want to get too deep into it as far as like learning scale shapes or shapes of the modes and things. This is sort of really just to demystify the topic in general, and then you can do your own research. If this has been useful, that's fantastic. Please let me know, and I've got some more videos coming under similar topics around this length. I'm going to try and keep the videos a little bit more substantial now. I've had my fill of sort of shorter videos, so if you stuck it to the end, amazing. I don't even want to look at the timer. But yeah, stay tuned for more videos, and I'll see you soon.